Hi everybody, this is Property with Leonard and welcome to another episode. Now on this channel we discuss property, finance and investments. Now please note that none of my videos constitutes as financial advice, but if you're looking for financial advice, please speak to an accredited and registered financial advisor. Now property is a great way to become financially secure, and buying an investment property is especially great when you've chosen a good location. However, there is one thing that no property owner wants to deal with, and that is being the landlord or landlord to a problem tenant. It's every landlord's nightmare, being stuck with a tenant who doesn't pay rent or isn't looking after your property, and they are most definitely also not adhering to the code of conduct of your property, and on top of that they refuse to move out no matter what you do. Now in an ideal situation it would be a simple matter to evict these kinds of tenants. But unfortunately, eviction is never the ideal situation. It can get messy and costly and time consuming. And as a qualified mediator, commercial mediator, mediation might inevitably be your best option here. And I would highly recommend that you rather go that route, or at least before you approach the courts, you should have tried mediation. Because court cases like these, and not forgetting, like I mentioned, the time and the money, and think about the added frustration, not just regarding this whole process, but during all of this, they are still occupying your property, and these types of tenants are known to wreck your place in addition to all of this. And at the end, you are so relieved to have them move out of the property that you take this cost on your own. Mediation will still cost you, but it will be much less, because just having them move out sooner rather than a year or two later, whilst you could have rented the property out to a new tenant in the interim. In my experience, even if you as the landlord decide to write off all outstanding debt, chances are greater that they won't damage the property any further. I'm not saying that this is what the outcome will be, but should you be in such a predicament, you are welcome to contact me for my services as a commercial mediator. I'll leave my details in the description below, or somewhere left or right, my telephone number and email address. And just another point that I would want to put out there, but I'm sure that you are fully aware of this by now, and that is that the South African housing law does arguably favor tenants' rights at this point in time. So that's just the way it is, and this stems from our need to protect citizens from this kind of mass evictions that took place during apartheid. It has left opportunities for unscrupulous tenants to take advantage of underprepared or uninformed landlords. The apartheid government, they had this instituted. They were brutal and heartless, with complete and utter disregard for basic human rights for people of color. In this episode, I would like to help you go about addressing serious issues with tenants and how soon you can consider evictions. So let me first help you to understand evictions. Now essentially, evictions is when a landlord, which might be you, or property owner, retracts or denies consent for someone to occupy their property. When someone is evicted, they are legally required to leave the property within a specified time frame. However, in order to protect the tenant's rights, the law does not permit arbitrary evictions. This means that before you are evicted, there must be a court order. And a court order must consider how the eviction will affect the people who will be evicted, and the evictions cannot be done without good reason. This means, and you need to listen carefully, as the landlord, you will be required to provide a reasonable explanation as to why you wish to evict your tenant. And that is why following the correct procedure is absolutely crucial in this eviction process. You need to be aware of your rights as the landlord and the rights of the tenants being issued this eviction order. Now this is very important, because illegal evictions may lead to delays that leave you stuck with a problem tenant for much longer if the proper procedures and legalities are not properly observed. If you are currently in such a predicament, I would highly recommend that you review the proper processes in the Prevention of Illegal Eviction and of course the Unlawful Occupation of Property Act. the PI Act. During this hearing, the court hearing that is, both landlord and the tenant need to be present in court. As with the landlord, the tenant also has the right to seek legal counsel and have their lawyer as well present in court. As I mentioned, this can be a long, drawn-out process, which is problematic when the rent isn't being paid to the landlord in the interim. And worse still, your tenant's behavior is causing damage to your property. There are ways, of course, to expedite this process. You can insure yourself against this eventuality. And I would advise that you speak to your insurance broker in this regard. But in the end, prevention is always better than cure. And in addition to this, let me just give you some pointers on how to prevent the need for an eviction. Because inevitably, that's the ideal. You want to prevent this. First of all, you need to familiarize yourself with the Rental Housing and Prevention of Illegal Evictions Act and understand your responsibilities under the Contract Law and the Consumer Protection Act. It's definitely advisable also to sit down with an expert who can explain the relevant intricacies and how to protect yourself from a legal professional's perspective. That's always advisable. This is one of the areas in which a good rental agent can make a world of difference. So guard against being penny wise and pound foolish. And as part of this process, you'll obviously need to put together a rental contract which complies with all the legal requirements without leaving any loopholes. Because breach of contract is a trigger that begins this eviction process. It is highly recommended, in fact, you should ensure to get professional assistance with your rental agreements, whether this is via a rental agent or a qualified attorney. And another important point is screening potential tenants. That's of utmost importance. It's absolutely imperative that you check credit records, financial and employment histories, and get contactable references. Very important. And do make those calls. Don't just take someone at face value. It can be tricky to get hold of some of this information, and I'm aware of it as a private individual, but you should never ever skip this step. If you're having trouble, rather get a professional to help you. And even if you've taken all possible precautions and still end up in the unfortunate position of needing to evict a tenant, my advice to you is don't try to handle this problem off the record in an effort to speed up the process, and you will be tempted, but don't do it. Let me explain why. Any deviation from the standard eviction process weakens your chances of success. That's why it's vital that you dot all the I's and cross all the T's, because the tenants will smile with you and make empty promises to you to delay this whole process, because it's public knowledge that no matter what, you can't just put them out. You can't just evict them. It's against the law. I felt so bad for landlords during lockdown who were stuck with tenants for almost 2 years because no evictions were allowed while we were still under this state of disaster. And some tenants, although they could afford to pay their rent, and I'm referring to those ones who could afford to pay, they took full advantage of that. And that is just shameful. It's selfish. It says so much about a person's character. So if after all this, you're proceeding with the eviction process, the eviction process will start by issuing the tenant with a written notification that they are in breach of contract and giving them a minimum of 20 working days to rectify the situation, in fairness. And if they don't comply, you can officially cancel your lease agreement and apply to the court for a summons or a rent interdict, and of course after that the eviction action. There are of course costs associated with taking legal action, and I've mentioned that before, but if you've made provision for it in your rental contract, it is possible to recover these costs from your tenant. The tenant can and will most probably oppose your actions, which can complicate things. But if you followed the correct procedures and your actions have been lawful from the start, your chances of success should be good. There's no guarantee, but it should be good. Just in summary, this is a nightmare that I wish upon nobody, and it can get messy and costly and time consuming. So get a professional like a rental agent or an attorney to help you with drawing up the initial contract. I would recommend you use a rental agent because they have existing contracts, and for an average of 10% of the monthly rental income that you pay them as a commission, they will administer everything for you. The attorney will charge you to draw up the contract, and that is it. Perhaps what you can do, my advice is, just ask the attorney to have a look at the rental contract just for extra peace of mind. I would also recommend that you first try mediation before starting with this eviction process. It will cost you considerably less and might save you a lot of time and frustrations. And once again, you're welcome to contact me. I am a qualified commercial mediator who, amongst other areas, specialize in property matters. I would definitely be able to assist you, and I would leave my details in the description below, or my telephone numbers either left or right or both, and my email address as I mentioned. Thank you so much, everybody. I sincerely hope that this episode was of value to you. And I must just add, I hope you're not in this predicament. And if you are, that the episode was of value to you and it can help you just to get through this. There's of course no guarantees. You can do all the checks and balances and you can still end up with tenants like these. And just as a disclaimer, I'm not referring to tenants who lose their jobs or their spouses or partners when there are legitimate reasons why they can't pay their rent. But there's always compromises to be made. Bottom line is you are occupying someone else's property, so there is a liability and a responsibility that you have in that regard. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining me in today's episode. If this episode was of value to you, can I kindly ask you, if you haven't, to please subscribe to my channel, to like this video and to share it, and leave me a comment in the comment section below. Thank you so much. I see you in the next episode. Stay blessed.